So we've hit game turn 10, and just to bring it back to where we left off, so now we can breach the border of Idaho uh, with our indigenous units. I've spread them all out just so I could have a look at exactly who's what and what the movement points are. So you can see our entire, all of our bands there. I had them stacked onto one hex. I figured that was the best strategy. Keep everybody together so in case there was an attack, I could have a large group to help protect everybody. So my thoughts now are this. So after reading the instructions a little closer, when you enter or exit mountain hex, it has to be through a river, on a hex side with a river. So that hex side there we could enter, move through, and come out this end over here is what I'm thinking now. So based on Chief Joseph, who has the slowest movement, I'm thinking of doing the fast movement, which is the 13. So it would be 3. That would be 4. That would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, which would get Chief Joseph and everybody else there. I don't know if it's worth breaking them up just yet until we get out here, because then we can kind of try to fend some people off. But I think everybody should stick together into the mountains here, because there is that -4 to their die roll if they do come in after us. And then eventually escape out this side and try to make our way up into this area where we have to be within however many game turns that was. Don't remember what I said in the previous video, but there you go. So that's the strategy going forward. We'll see how that works. So I'm just about to wrap it up for the next little while and maybe return to this later tonight. But I wanted to talk to you about the searches, and I figured we'd put together a little example here. So what I've done is I've separated the bands up, the indigenous bands up. I've kept Chief Joseph and most of the other bands there in the mountains, and 2 units have broken off. Whitebird and Looking Glass have broken off on their own in hopes of kind of drawing the units towards them to some degree, and sort of getting out ahead of everybody. So I was going to bring Washington and Ron into searching the hex for them and do a little bit of combat. But it's just not worth it. It's not worth the odds. So I put together and I rolled a die as well too, just so we can have a look at this all together. Just explain this part of the search. So when it comes to searching a hex, the indigenous players always are successful. They don't need to do any die rolls or any sort of modification. They can choose to interact and fight with the army player if they want to, but they don't have to. The army unit, on the other hand, the army units, they are obliged to do a search when they end up in the same hex as the indigenous player. And if they're successful, they have to go to the tactical map. They have to fight. So how do you determine that? So in this scenario right here, the third number, so on Washington, you can see a 10, a 16, and a 3. And then on Ron, a 7, a 10, and a 1. The 3 and the 1 are their search values. So 3 plus 1 is 4. On Whitebird and Looking Glass, you can see a 5 and a 6. That's their, what do they call it? It's like their elusive value. I can't remember off the top of my head now what the term is that they use. But you do not add those 2 numbers together. You take the lowest one, which in this case would be 5. So the army player has a 4, and we subtract that 5 to it, which gives us a -1. There is no -1 on the table, so it reverts to the 0, and I'll show you that in a second. Then you take what the effects are for the terrain. In this particular instant, we're on rolling hills. So that means that whatever the die is rolled, it's going to be a -1 to it. So in this case, if we rolled a 5, it would actually be a 4 that we were looking on the table. And just to show you that table, just so we can see what it looks like here. There's the search table here. So you can see whatever your superiority is, whatever the die roll is. So in our case, we'd be looking on the 0 column, which again, we can't do because there is no ability to be successful at all on the 0 column. But if we look at the 7 column, for example, we rolled a 4, so we'd cross that die roll of 4 would give us a C, which means that we would have had contact with them, which means that then we would be moving over to the tactical map and starting to fight. So that's the basics of how the search table is used. But again, in this particular instant, it's not worth it for the army player. I had brought Perry in, and Browning got activated from Hex 2112, but they were unable to get there to kind of add their value to this particular search. So now it's just left at moving on to game turn 12. So this was for game turn 11. The indigenous player used their fast movement, so they can't do fast movement until 14. Turn 12, there we can see the P1. That's just to remind me that now these units on the next turn will be free to cross the Snake River and start to join the rest of the troops here. So I think we're going to see things get a little more intense as we go into the next rounds here. So I'll check in with you later. We're in game turn 13, and if you see Chief Joseph's counter there in Hex 3119, those were the units that were jumped on by the army units there. So Washington, Perry, and Howard entered the Hex. So as I was saying before, when you are doing a search and you're the army units, you take the lowest value, which in this case was Chief Joseph at a 0. So you got 4 plus 3 is 7, minus 0 is 7. So we're searching on the 7 table here for our search table. And then because of the terrain that we're in, we have a -1 to the die roll. The die roll was a 5, so that makes it a 4, which gives us a result of C, which is basically they were seen, they were detected. So that means we're going to be moving over to the tactical map. I've set it up, and I'll show you that in a second here. So after the units have been detected, you go to the state of contact table, which determines the alertness level of the opponent, in this case the indigenous opponents. So because Chief Joseph had been discovered, we're going to be looking under the B table here, which is the village. I believe I rolled a 4 on this one because they were into alerted status. And each of the different, so ambushing, alerted, surprised, each of them have different setup rules for them. Let's see if we can find it here. General procedure, here we go. So alerted status is over here, and it just gives you a little paragraph of how you set up. Basically, the attacking player, in this case the army units, are going to let us know. So we were on the Rolling Hills, so we're using the Rolling Hills tactical map here. Sorry about the lighting, it's getting darker, and I just wanted to put my thoughts together on this first. The army units decided they were going to enter from this side of the map. Because Chief Joseph had been part of this, that means all the lodges and camps come with him. There's rules specific to lodges and camps. They must be on a riverside hex, which is why they're set up here. And then I can set up my units however I want. And then once that's done, once that's done, the army player sets up their units, and the game continues. And when we get into this, all we're doing is we're looking the same thing like on the strategic map. You're just looking at the terrain. There's different terrain types. There's different movement costs. There's a bunch of the counters here that are double-sided. One side will be for fighters that are unmounted. The other side will be for them on their horses. when they're on horses, they don't have an attack strength. They have a melee strength. When it comes to stacking, there are limitations here on this side. The indigenous players can be stacked up to 3 in 1 hex at the end of a turn. The army players cannot be stacked at all. They have to end their turn on a hex of their own. I believe you can pass through hexes of your own people. There isn't zones of control, but if you, unlike on the strategic map, if you enter a hex on the tactical map with an opponent, your turn ends and you have to stop in that specific hex. So in the world of what the fuck were you thinking when these rules were put together, these pages were incredibly frustrating. I don't understand the choice of layout. The melee table here is a good one. So when you're in a battle, you look at the melee table there and you're getting results such as 1M/1M or 1K/1M. What the hell does K mean? What does M mean? Usually there's a little legend. Why would you put it there? It's a couple of pages, here it is, a couple of pages back, where you can find out what each of those mean. When you do your search table, you've searched for the units and you've been successful. Go to the type of contact. Once you do the melee table and you find an M, which stands for morale, you refer to this morale table over here. I don't know who laid out this fucking thing. Why isn't this over here with state of contact underneath it? Why isn't melee up here with morale in here? Fire, like I just don't understand who puts these kind of things together and doesn't get the very basics of a layout, of good layout in mind. There's plenty of room here. You could do some reformatting if there isn't, to make room on that page. I just don't understand, but whatever. The thing is, with some of these things, even in this tactical rule set, again, the confusion and the way that things are laid out, it's this kind of thing, because they're happening in such abundance, that it really makes me hesitant to support this company and these games going forward. I do realize this could very well be these specific designers. I get all that, but it does leave a bad taste in my mouth, especially when we're dealing with, this is Paper Wars magazine issue number 82. This isn't issue number 2, where they're still trying to find their feet and figure out how to create a game here. But I mean, overall thoughts, it's enjoyable. It has its moments. I found the rule set probably one of the most confusing rule sets I think I've read in a long time, since I kind of started doing this type of wargaming. I don't think I'll be doing any more videos past this point. I'll just kind of play the game. If there's something really, really incredible that comes up, I'll for sure point to it. But that's kind of a good overview of how everything works here for I Will Fight No More Forever. It's one that if you're a seasoned wargamer and you're interested in it, go for it. If you're interested in this kind of history, absolutely give it a shot. If you're looking for a game and you're kind of a newer gamer to these war games or this style of war games, I would probably leave this one and find something else. Give anything else a try. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one. So thanks very much for paying attention, everybody, and we'll talk to you.